The overhead lamps hummed with their usual low, metallic buzz inside Redwater Garrison's dining hall, that long, echoing room where Friday evenings usually smelled of grease, coffee, and exhausted soldiers waiting for the weekend to start. But tonight, the hum was cut by a sharper, colder sound, Sergeant Holt Maddox's voice slicing through the noise like it had been honed on steel. "Is this supposed to be a joke?" he barked, his tone booming across the hall. "Who told you to walk in here dressed like that?" Every head swiveled toward the woman standing just inside the doorway, a woman who did not flinch under 200 staring eyes. Her name was Zara Kingsley, fit, toned, dark skin glinting under the fluorescent lights, her braids pulled into a neat high ponytail, her posture quiet but strangely steady. She wore a uniform jacket too large for her, sleeves swallowing her wrists, paired with a charcoal gray shirt tucked into regulation cargo pants. Her shoulders hunched just slightly as if she were bracing for impact, and she was, just not the kind anyone in the building was prepared for. Before the confrontation grew any sharper, the narrator's voice broke through, steady, guiding. "Before I tell you what happened next, subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments where you are watching from. It helps more than you know." Zara kept her hands folded around a folded slip of paper. "Orders," she said. But the soldiers of Redwater weren't interested in paperwork. Least of all Holt. He stepped forward, 6'3", all brawn and arrogance, the kind of man who loved being the loudest presence in any room. Around him, his squad rose from their table like vultures drawn by movement. Lieutenant Karina Doyle, with her perfect bun and colder-than-winter stare, circled Zara as if evaluating a threat she didn't take seriously. "Hate to break it to you, sweetheart," Doyle said, "but pretending to be military personnel is a federal offense. And that jacket looks like you pulled it off a thrift rack." Laughter rippled through the hall. Phones lifted. The smell of mockery coated the air thicker than the fryer grease. Zara bowed her head slightly, eyes lowered, not shrinking, not frightened, but controlled, measured, observing. In the back corner of the hall, a man lowered his ramen cup slowly. Captain Andre Navarro, Intelligence Division stationed at Redwater for data audits, though no one had ever actually seen him audit anything. He watched Zara with a narrow, calculating gaze as he thumbed discreetly at the inside of his sleeve, activating a silent recorder no one knew he carried. Zara's voice, when it finally came, was soft. "I was told to report here, sir." "Told?" Holt scoffed. "By who? Some recruiter on TikTok?" More laughter. But beneath her resting posture, Zara shifted her feet into a balanced stance. Her breathing slowed. Her eyes tracked the exits, the angles, the distance between bodies. Not prey calculations, predator ones. And Navarro? He noticed. Corporal Ellis Granger, a mountain of a man whose forearms looked like they'd been carved from riverstone, stepped forward next. "If you're wearing our uniform," he said, "you must know the basics. Positions, commands, protocols." He smirked. Or was that too hard to Google? Holt cracked his knuckles. Doyle folded her arms. 200 onlookers leaned closer. Zara straightened, her posture locked into razor-sharp attention. Her voice changed. No tremble, no hesitation. "Yes, Corporal." Granger blinked. "All right, then. Show me attention stance." She executed it with perfect form. Crisp, fast, textbook. Conversations died. "About face," Granger ordered, confidence wavering. She pivoted with parade ground accuracy, boots striking the floor with a precise double tap. A ripple of unease moved through the room. Holt stepped closer, jaw tight. "Lucky guess," he muttered, and then he lifted his sidearm. Safety cleared, magazine removed, chamber empty, and set it on the table in front of her. "Field strip it. Reassemble. Under 30 seconds." It was meant to break her. Instead, it broke the room. Zara's fingers became blurs. Metal clicking softly, pieces landing in perfect order. The weapon lay bare in less than 15 seconds, reassembled in even fewer. When she handed it back to Holt, her expression was impassive, almost bored. Conversations did not resume. Laughter did not return. Even Doyle's smug jaw twitched with doubt. Navarro sat straighter. He knew exactly what kind of training produced that level of efficiency, and it wasn't anything Redwater Garrison offered. But Holt wasn't finished. He couldn't be. His ego wouldn't let him. Cute trick, he said tightly. But let's really test those orders of yours. He reached for her jacket collar, and Zara's eyes finally lifted to his. Steady, calm, borderline pitying. Something inside Holt flinched. He didn't understand why, but the room was seconds away from discovering the reason. Because in a moment, Holt Maddox would demand something from Zara Kingsley that no sane man would ever ask, and Redwater Garrison would learn exactly who they had just challenged. Sergeant Holt Maddox didn't back away after Zara's flawless weapons display. If anything, the shock in the room only pushed him further into the corner he had built for himself, a corner made of pride and insecurity masquerading as authority. 200 soldiers watched him, waiting to see how he would reclaim control of a situation he no longer understood. Lieutenant Karina Doyle hovered at his shoulder, arms folded, her expression tightening with every second of silence. She hated uncertainty even more than she hated being outshined, and Zara Kingsley, quiet, composed, unbothered, was already dismantling both. "All right," Holt said finally, voice lower now, forced steady. "You're good with your hands. Cute, but let's see if you can handle real equipment." Corporal Granger opened the reinforced cabinet where training rifles were stored. He retrieved a carbine, an older model used for drills but complex enough that almost no rookie ever stripped it cleanly on the first try. He slapped it on the table in front of Zara. "Break it down," Granger said, "then put it back together. Under 20 seconds. Someone in the crowd muttered, "That's impossible." Doyle smirked. "Exactly." Zara stepped forward, her hands calm, movements deliberate. She examined the weapon with the same quiet focus she'd given the sidearm, as though she were greeting an old friend instead of a challenge meant to humiliate her. When she began, it was with no hesitation. Pins out, receiver open, bolt group removed, parts separated in a clean, efficient sequence. No fumbling, no searching, no confusion. Her fingers moved with the kind of muscle memory that came from repetition carved into the body over years. Not days, not weeks. 17 seconds later, the rifle sat whole again on the table, pristine and perfectly reassembled. The hall went absolutely silent. Someone's fork hit a plate and clattered loud enough to echo. Holt stared at the rifle like it had betrayed him personally. Corporal Granger stepped back, chest rising and falling as though he had sprinted. Doyle's eyes narrowed, sharp and calculating. Evaluating, reassessing, trying to force Zara's existence into a mental folder where it simply wouldn't fit. And in the corner, Captain Andre Navarro crossed his arms and lifted his chin slightly, as if confirming a suspicion he'd had long before this evening began. Zara placed her hands behind her back again in that same relaxed posture, the one that looked harmless from a distance but up close revealed perfect balance and readiness. Granger cleared his throat. "Where'd you learn to handle weapons like that?" Zara's answer was soft, almost apologetic. "Practice, sir." The understatement rattled the tension further. "Practice?" Doyle repeated, almost laughing. "What kind of practice produces that?" But Zara didn't elaborate, and her silence only made the room lean closer. Private Mateo Ward, young, nervous, and still carrying the softness of a man barely out of high school, spoke from behind the crowd. "Maybe we should, ease up. She's clearly following orders." Holt cut him a glare that could have scorched earth. "You questioning my judgment, Ward?" The private swallowed. "No, sir. I just—" "Then stay quiet." Ward's jaw tightened, but he obeyed. Just not completely. Because when Zara's eyes lifted briefly and met his, there was a flicker. Recognition. Maybe gratitude, maybe understanding. Something that made Ward straighten just an inch taller. Doyle stepped around Zara again, assessing her like a puzzle she didn't want to admit she couldn't solve. "Let's see something else," Doyle said, tapping her phone's flashlight on and off. "Medical scenario, basic field trauma. You must know how to handle those too, right?" She pulled a first aid kit from a nearby shelf and dropped it onto the table. "Soldier takes shrapnel to the thigh. Heavy arterial bleeding," she said. "Show us what you do." Zara didn't hesitate. She opened the kit, her movements fluid, decisive. She explained as she worked, applying pressure, positioning an improvised tourniquet, stabilizing the imaginary casualty with sharp, precise steps. Doyle, Granger, and even Holt watched her hands more than her words. because her hands told the real story. Zara wasn't improvising. She had done this before, more than once. When she finished, she checked an invisible pulse, adjusted the imaginary soldier's position, and stepped back. 1 minute. 0 wasted motion. Navarro, still silent in the corner, typed something discreetly into his encrypted device. Holt's face had gone tight, cold, unreadable. "That's enough," he said. But the soldiers were no longer mocking. Their faces had shifted. Curiosity replacing cruelty. Confusion replacing arrogance. The room was on the edge of something. They could feel it. And Holt felt threatened. He stepped closer until he was inches from Zara, looming over her. "If you really belong here," he said slowly, "then you don't mind proving you've got nothing to hide." Zara didn't move, didn't blink. "What do you mean, Sergeant?" she asked quietly. Holt crossed his arms. "Take off your jacket." 200 soldiers tensed. He wasn't done. "After all," he added, voice dripping challenge, "if you're authorized to be here, you shouldn't have a problem showing us." Zara's inhale was soft, almost unnoticeable, but Navarro noticed. Ward noticed. Every instinct in Zara's body shifted in ways most people didn't understand, but the sergeant was about to. Because when Zara Kingsley lifted her eyes, truly lifted them, Holt Maddox realized too late that he had just crossed a line no one at Redwater Garrison was prepared for. Sergeant Holt Maddox expected hesitation. He expected fear, embarrassment, stammering, maybe even tears. That was how this always went when he cornered someone he believed beneath him. And with 200 soldiers watching, he wanted her humiliation to be absolute. But Zara Kingsley didn't recoil. Instead, she stood still. So still it unsettled everyone who had been laughing moments before. The oversized uniform jacket hung loosely on her shoulders, swallowing her frame, making her look smaller, less imposing. Holt thought removing it would expose weakness. He had no idea he was about to expose his own. Lieutenant Karina Doyle folded her arms, chin lifting with smug anticipation. Corporal Granger shifted uneasily, sensing Holt was stepping into dangerous territory but unwilling to challenge him publicly. Private Mateo Ward watched like a man clutching the edge of a cliff, and Captain Andre Navarro. He stayed in his shadowed corner, expression unreadable, but his thumb hovered over his encrypted device, ready to send one command that would change everything. Zara finally spoke. "If removing the jacket is necessary for clarity," she said quietly, "I'll comply." Her voice wasn't timid this time, just calm, controlled, like she was narrating events she knew the ending to. Holt nodded sharply. "Do it." Zara's fingers rose to the buttons. The hall held its breath. She undid them slowly, not dragging it out but not rushing either. Each one clicked softly, echoing more than it should have in a room full of soldiers suddenly frozen in place. When the jacket finally slipped from her shoulders, the atmosphere cracked. Zara's gray shirt clung to her athletic build, shoulders sculpted, arms toned, her torso defined not from gym vanity but from years of functional strength. Her presence shifted immediately. This wasn't a fragile woman playing soldier. This was someone who moved like she'd been trained to fight in environments far harsher than Redwater Garrison. Private Ward swallowed hard. "Sir, maybe we should stop." Holt shot him a warning glare. "No one asked you." Doyle smirked. "Relax, Ward." She agreed, but Ward wasn't looking at Holt or Doyle. He was staring at Zara, at the way she stood, weight balanced perfectly, like she had quietly absorbed the dimensions of every exit and every threat. She didn't look exposed. She looked grounded. Holt wasn't done. "Now the shirt," he demanded. A ripple of gasps spread through the hall. Even Doyle blinked. "Sergeant, that's not protocol. It is when verifying an unidentified person on base," he snapped. "You want to argue with me in front of my own squad?" Doyle shut her mouth. She liked power, but not enough to challenge Holt when the crowd was watching. Corporal Granger looked away for a moment, guilt or discomfort flickering, though he tried to hide it. But Navarro's posture tightened. He knew this moment was coming, and he knew what it would reveal. Zara lifted her eyes then, truly lifted them, meeting Holt's directly for the first time since she walked in. Her gaze was unblinking, calm, and impossibly steady. "If you insist," Zara said. She reached for the hem of her shirt. But before she lifted it, she spoke again, softly but with a weight that rolled through the hall like distant thunder. "Are you certain you want to do this, Sergeant?" The question wasn't defiance. It was warning. Holt scoffed. "Enough games. Lift it." Zara inhaled, long and deliberate. Her braids shifted gently as she squared her stance. Then she raised the shirt just enough for the first edges of ink to appear. Black lines. Clean. Sharp. Not decorative. Symbolic. A half-glimpsed emblem that seemed to pulse with meaning before disappearing beneath fabric again as she paused deliberately. Doyle leaned in, frowning. "What is that?" Navarro leaned forward in his seat, pupils narrowing. He recognized the first curve of the design instantly, but Holt didn't. He only saw the opportunity to push further. "Up, all the way," Holt ordered. Zara closed her eyes for half a second. Something between acceptance and inevitability flashing across her face. Then she lifted the shirt. Gasps exploded. Someone's tray fell to the floor. A chair screeched loudly as a soldier stumbled backward. Across Zara's back stretched an intricate inked sigil. Not dragons, not symmetrical mythology, not the familiar form of the ghost program from your original text. This one was different, new. 2 serpents, one obsidian, one ivory, coiled around a shattered compass, their bodies woven through fractured directional points. Above them a single phrase marked in sweeping script, "Where I stand, danger shifts." Only a handful of soldiers even recognized it, but the ones who did went pale as dust, because that wasn't a tattoo. It was an identification mark, one reserved only for a classified unit so obscure that most upper command denied it existed. The Null Meridian, a silent operations force rumored to, quote, handle missions where geography, identity, and morality blurred into a single line, and crossing that line meant disappearing without a trace. Granger whispered it before anyone else could. "Oh, hell. She's Meridian." The room lost its breath. Holt's bravado drained from his face, leaving behind something hollow. And Navarro rose quietly from his chair, because he knew this was only the beginning. Because in a moment everyone at Redwater Garrison would realize that Zara Kingsley's tattoo wasn't the most dangerous thing about her. It was what the Null Meridian had sent her there to uncover. For a long, suspended moment, no one in Redwater Garrison breathed. Zara Kingsley stood with her shirt lifted just high enough to reveal the full emblem etched across her back. The serpents, the shattered compass, the phrase that had made even seasoned soldiers reel. Null Meridian. The name drifted through the hall like a cold draft. Whispers broke loose in jittery threads. "No way. That can't be real. I thought they were disbanded. My instructor said Meridian never actually existed." But the ones who knew, truly knew, said nothing at all. Their silence spoke louder than any disbelief. Zara lowered her shirt with the same calm precision she'd used in every motion that night. Her breathing did not hitch. Her hands did not shake. Her demeanor did not change. Sergeant Holt Maddox, however, looked like the ground beneath him had cracked open, his jaw clenched and unclenched, his tongue collecting words he couldn't form. Shame, panic, denial. They flickered across his face like static. Lieutenant Karina Doyle took a half-step back despite herself, a rare fissure of fear slipping through her polished exterior. Corporal Granger rubbed the back of his neck, muttering under his breath as if trying to convince himself the tattoo was fake. And from the far table, Captain Andre Navarro, the only one who looked unsurprised, walked forward with slow, deliberate steps. He stopped 3 paces from Zara. "Kingsley," he said quietly, "state your purpose." His tone had changed. Gone was the casual observer. This was a man speaking to an equal, or someone very close to outranking him in ways not listed on any organizational chart. Zara met his gaze without hesitation. Null Meridian Deployment Directive, Site Integrity Audit, Behavioral Stress Assessment, Internal Breach Evaluation. All findings to be delivered to central oversight upon completion. Her words were calm, clipped, operative cadence. A ripple of shock moved through the hall. Holt swallowed. Breach evaluation? What breach? Zara didn't answer him at first. She was watching Navarro, because he hadn't reacted, because he already knew. After a long pause, Navarro spoke softly enough that only the front rows heard him. "You weren't assigned here. It wasn't a question. "No, sir," Zara replied. "I volunteered." A wave of unease tightened the air. Doyle stepped forward, voice trembling just enough to betray cracks in her composure. "Volunteered? To do what? Humiliate us? Make us look foolish?" Zara turned her head just slightly toward her, gaze steady but not cruel. "You made yourselves look foolish." Doyle recoiled like she'd been slapped. But Zara wasn't finished. "My mandate was to observe how quickly authority collapses under stress." Her eyes slid toward Holt. "And how easily cruelty becomes policy when unchecked." Private Mateo Ward felt heat crawl into his chest. The kind that came from hearing truth spoken plainly. The kind that made a man reevaluate himself. Holt took a shaky breath, trying to rebuild his shattered dominance. You can't come in here and judge us. You don't know anything about Redwater." Zara tilted her head. "I know enough." Her voice didn't rise, didn't sharpen. It simply arrived, like a scalpel making its first incision. "I know that within 2 minutes of entering this room you decided I was beneath you. I know you escalated without cause. I know your team followed you because fear is easier than integrity." Her gaze moved around the hall, not condemning, just seeing. "You all showed me your culture," she said. "That is precisely what I was sent to evaluate." Granger frowned. "Sent to by who?" Navarro finally answered. "Central Oversight." That name meant nothing to most of the room and Nadeau, but the officers flinched. Central Oversight wasn't a department. It wasn't a task force. It was a whisper. The kind of shadow-level entity rumored to oversee the overseers. Doyle felt her stomach drop. "Central Oversight only sends agents when an installation is compromised," Navarro finished coldly. The word compromised sent tension across the room like a shockwave. Holt's panic sharpened. "We're not compromised. This base is fine." Zara's eyes softened, not with sympathy but with the kind of sadness that comes from watching someone deny a truth too large to outrun. "Sergeant," she said quietly, "Redwater Garrison has been under silent infiltration for over 4 months." A hush dropped like a brick. Ward's eyes widened. "By who?" Zara looked past him toward the emergency exit doors. "Infiltrators who don't need weapons to dismantle a base." She paused. "They need people." Doyle's breath hitched. "People?" Zara nodded. "Someone has been feeding behavioral assessments, daily communication logs, and structural vulnerabilities to an outside network." Navarro's jaw tightened. He knew this part was coming. Zara finally turned. Not to the crowd, not to Doyle, not to Holt, but to Navarro. "Captain," she said softly, "your final message was sent 16 minutes ago." 200 soldiers froze. Navarro did not deny it. He didn't reach for a weapon, didn't step back, didn't look cornered. He simply exhaled, slowly, like a man whose choices had finally arrived at their final consequence. Zara continued, "You've been their handler this entire time." Holt's face twisted. "Handler? For who?" Zara's gaze shifted to the soldiers around her. "For the network calling itself the Viridian Fold. A name no one wanted to hear. A name that meant internal seduction, ideological recruitment, quiet collapse." The room erupted in whispers, fear, disbelief, and then Zara lifted one hand, not aggressively but with command. The hall fell silent instantly, because the next words out of Zara Kingsley's mouth would expose exactly how deep the Viridian Fold had already woven itself into Redwater, and which soldier wasn't going to leave the hall tonight. A silence heavier than body armor settled across Redwater Garrison's dining hall. Zara Kingsley stood at the center of it, expression steady, posture balanced, tone calm. Too calm for the weight of what she had just revealed. The Viridian Fold, a name that sounded harmless until spoken aloud by someone who knew its true meaning. Sergeant Holt Maddox stared at Zara like she'd spoken in a foreign language. Lieutenant Karina Doyle looked visibly shaken. Her earlier arrogance splintered into raw unease. Corporal Granger shifted his weight anxiously, adjusting his grip on nothing, as though searching for a weapon that wasn't there. But Captain Andre Navarro, he was the still point in the chaos, not defiant, not panicked, just resigned. Zara lowered her hand. "Redwater's breach wasn't random," she said. "It was cultivated, slowly, quietly. It relied on weakness, insecurity, and hunger for influence. It spread through conversations, favors, anonymous messages, subtle promises. Her eyes moved around the hall, and every soldier felt as if she were speaking directly to them. The Viridian Fold doesn't force conversion, it nudges it. It whispers, it makes you feel chosen. Doyle shivered. Why here? Why Redwater? Zara turned slightly, braids brushing over her shoulder as she addressed the question. Redwater was chosen because it is understaffed, underfunded, and overlooked by upper command. That creates fertile ground for ideological infiltration. Soldiers who feel unseen become easy targets. Holt opened his mouth, defensive. We're not. You are, Zara interrupted gently. Exactly what they look for. Holt stopped speaking. Private Mateo Ward stepped forward cautiously, voice soft but steady. Ma'am, who exactly did Captain Navarro report to? Zara hesitated, not out of uncertainty, but because the answer changed everything. Not a single leader, she said. A distributed network. Academics, former officers, civilian strategists, all united under one belief. And that is, Doyle asked. Zara's eyes sharpened. That the military should operate outside government oversight. A ripple of dread tightened the air. Granger muttered a curse. Doyle's breath hitched. Holt shook his head. That's treason. Navarro finally spoke, and his voice was calm. It's preservation. Zara turned toward him fully now. Explain, she said. He did. They believe, Navarro said quietly, that elected officials are too inconsistent, too reactive, too vulnerable to public pressure. The Fold wants a force that answers only to itself, to its own logic, its own discipline. Zara's gaze didn't soften. And you agreed? Navarro didn't hesitate. At first. The room leaned in. At first, he continued, it felt like patriotism, like stepping into a greater purpose. They talk about stability, continuity, strength. They show you the world's failures and tell you you're helping fix them. Ward swallowed. And now? Navarro's eyes grew tired. Now I see the cost. Zara nodded as if she had expected that answer. The Fold uses intellectual authority to disguise moral decay, she said. They convince soldiers that disobedience is noble, that loyalty is weakness, that secrecy is protection. Doyle whispered. So, who else is part of it? Zara inhaled slowly, a quiet, controlled breath that told everyone she was calculating the impact of her next words. There are 4 known affiliates on this base. A collective flinch rippled through the room. Granger's hand hovered near his belt like he expected someone to attack. Holt's voice cracked. 4? Zara nodded. 2 of them were recruited willingly. Her eyes moved toward the middle rows. 1 is being manipulated. She paused. And 1, she added softly, isn't aware they're being used at all. Ward's brows pulled together. Ma'am, you said were. Past tense. Zara's gaze sharpened. Yes, Doyle whispered. Why past tense? Zara shifted her stance, that subtle rebalancing she did when preparing to drop truth like a hammer. Because one of the Fold's affiliates was removed from the base earlier today. Holt blinked. Removed? How? Silently, Zara replied, professionally, without disturbance. Central Oversight recovered them at 600 hours. The soldiers murmured uneasily. Ward's breath stuttered. And the others? Zara kept her eyes on Navarro. 1 is standing directly in front of us. Navarro lowered his gaze. He didn't deny it. Granger took a step forward. Then the other 2. They're here, Zara said, right now, in this hall. Fear rippled like electricity. Doyle scanned faces rapidly, pulse racing. Who? Which ones? Zara looked around the room. Slow, deliberate, letting dread settle before speaking. I will identify them, she said. But not yet. Holt's frustration flared. Why not? Because, Zara replied, if I reveal their names before securing the hall, someone will die before the next 60 seconds pass. 200 soldiers froze as one, because now the threat was no longer theoretical. It was sitting among them, breathing their air, watching them, because one of the Viridian Fold's hidden operatives was about to make a move, and Zara Kingsley knew exactly who it would be. 200 soldiers stood frozen in Redwater Garrison's dining hall, held in place not by weapons but by the quiet certainty in Zara Kingsley's voice. There were infiltrators here. Now, listening, breathing in the same room, and one of them, according to her, was about to make a move. Sergeant Holt Maddox's pulse hammered visibly at his throat. His earlier arrogance had drained completely, leaving behind nothing but raw fear masked as anger. "Who?" Holt demanded, "and point them out now." Zara didn't answer. Not immediately. Her stance shifted, subtle but intentional. She angled her body between Navarro and the bulk of the crowd, eyes flicking from soldier to soldier, tracking micro-expressions, tension spikes, footwork, hand placement. Lieutenant Karina Doyle hovered near the end of the nearest table, arms half raised as if unsure whether to shield herself or signal someone else. Her voice trembled. "Zara, if you know who it is, we need to—" "Not yet," Zara said softly. Corporal Granger clenched his jaw. "You can't just leave us hanging like—" Zara raised a single finger. Silence dropped instantly. Private Mateo Ward watched her with something like awe. Not worship, not fear, but sheer recognition. The kind that dawns when someone finally understands she is not here to intimidate. She is here to protect. Zara spoke without turning. "Captain Navarro." Navarro straightened. "Yes, you knew this moment was coming." He nodded once. "I did. And you know what happens next." Navarro's eyes softened with a quiet sadness. "Yes." The soldiers around him leaned away, unsure whether to see him as threat or victim. Holt looked back and forth between them. "What is happening? Why are you two talking like—" Then it happened. A chair scraped. A breath hitched. A hand dipped beneath a table. Zara moved before anyone else even knew where to look. In a blur of speed that stole the room's breath, she pivoted, lunged 3 paces to her left, and slammed her palm against the wrist of a soldier in the 3rd row, Specialist Ryland Torres, pinning his hand flat against the tabletop before the blade he'd been reaching for could clear the metal. The knife clattered free. Gasps exploded. Doyle stumbled backward. Granger cursed loudly. Holt stared like she had defied physics itself. Torres snarled, twisting violently. "Let go of me, you don't understand." "I do," Zara said calmly. "Better than you think." Torres bucked against her grip. "They promised stability. They promised you importance," she corrected. He froze, eyes widening. "They promised you a voice," Zara continued, "because you never felt you had one here." His breath hitched. A flinch. A truth revealed without a confession. But Zara wasn't looking at him anymore. Her gaze shifted again, to the right, to a soldier who had shrunk not from fear, but from guilt. Private First Class Elena Marek, a quiet woman, barely noticeable, always present, never disruptive. Her hands trembled as she tried to hide the device she had been palming under the table. Zara took 2 slow steps toward her. "Marek," she said gently. "Put it on the table." Marek shook her head, eyes glistening. I wasn't going to use it." "I know." "Then why—" "Because they manipulated you," Zara said. "You weren't recruited, you were coerced." Soft sobs trembled through the young soldier's chest. "I just wanted to help. I didn't know. I didn't realize what they were making me send." Zara kept her voice low. "You're not the one I'm worried about." And then Zara's gaze slid, sharp and sudden, toward the back corner of the room, to a man who had said nothing, done nothing, but whose stillness was too rigid, too calculating. Staff Sergeant Declan Firth. He had a reputation. Reliable, steady, a man who never questioned orders. Zara stepped toward him. Firth didn't blink, didn't breathe, didn't reach for anything. His hands rested on the table, palms flat, posture controlled. Too controlled. "Firth," Zara said quietly. "Stand up." He didn't. Doyle whispered, "Zara, he's one of the willing ones, isn't he?" Zara nodded once. "He's been feeding intel voluntarily. Without leverage, without manipulation." Firth slowly rose, posture eerily calm, as though he had been waiting for this very moment. "You ruined everything," he said softly. "Do you know that?" Zara didn't respond. She simply watched him. "I tried to save this place," Firth continued, voice trembling with conviction. "The fold gives purpose, structure. They hollowed you out," Zara said. "They replaced your loyalty with ideology. That isn't purpose." He smiled, a broken, dangerous smile. "You don't get it." Holt finally found his voice. "Someone cuff him." Zara lifted a hand sharply. "No one touches him. But No one. She never took her eyes off Firth, because she could see what the others couldn't. His pulse, his breathing, his shoulders, his stance. He wasn't preparing to run, he was preparing to do something far worse. Ward whispered, "Ma'am, what is he about to—" Zara inhaled slowly. Everyone stepped back. No one moved. Her voice sharpened, the only time she had raised it all night. "Step back." Soldiers scattered. Firth exhaled deeply like a man accepting his fate, and then he reached into his vest, because what Staff Sergeant Firth pulled from his vest wasn't a weapon, but something far, far more dangerous. When Staff Sergeant Declan Firth reached into his vest, half the dining hall braced for an explosive. A trigger, a detonator, something desperate and final. But what he pulled out made the room fall even quieter. It was a data key, small and matte black. No logo, no identifier, nearly invisible except for a tiny glowing ring at its center, pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. Zara Kingsley's shoulders lowered by a fraction. Her stance remained ready but not explosive. She knew this wasn't a bomb. It was worse. Firth held it between two fingers, raising it high enough for the hall to see. "This," he said softly, reverently, "is proof that I wasn't wrong." Holt Maddox blinked. "That's what you were going to reach for, a flash drive?" Firth laughed, an eerie, misplaced chuckle that made even Doyle cringe. "A flash drive," he echoed. "Sergeant, if only you knew what was on this." Zara stepped closer, slow and steady. "Firth, put the key on the table." He shook his head. "No, you don't get to erase it. You don't get to bury truth just because it scares you." "Truth?" Doyle snapped. "You've been feeding a rogue network. How is that truth?" Firth's eyes sharpened, not with madness but conviction carved deep into the bone. "The military is crumbling under lies," he said. "Politicians cut budgets, then demand miracles. Commanders chase optics instead of victories. The Fold wants structure, not chaos, order, not desperation." Zara tilted her head slightly. "The Fold wants obedience," she corrected. "Not strength." Firth's jaw tightened. "They want survival, and they use soldiers as pawns," Zara replied. Firth hesitated, a flicker of doubt. Small, fleeting, real. Private Mateo Ward stepped forward, voice gentle. "Firth, you were one of my mentors. The Fold didn't give you purpose. You already had it. You were the one who kept us steady during the wildfire drills, who talked Martinez down after his brother died, who stayed late after shifts to help rookies clear weapons safely." A crack ran through Firth's expression. Ward continued softly. "You mattered before they got to you." Firth swallowed hard, throat tightening. But then his grip tightened on the data key. "No," he whispered. "Not enough. Not in a system that eats its own. The Fold gives people a place to belong." Zara stepped forward again. "You think you belong because they made you feel seen," she said. "But belonging that comes from validation is dependency, not strength." That hit him. Everyone saw it, but the data key still glowed in his hand, a quiet threat humming with stored potential. "What's on it, Firth?" Granger demanded. "What did you steal?" Firth exhaled shakily. "Not stolen," he said. "Copied." Holt's brow furrowed. "Copied what?" Firth closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them with resolve. "Every weak point Zara identified in the past 4 hours." A murmur tore through the room. Zara didn't flinch. "You were watching me," she said. Not angry, just acknowledging. "Of course I was," Firth replied. "You're Meridian. You see everything. You measure everything. I followed your gaze, your body angle, your attention shifts, and I mapped all of it." Holt shouted. "Mapped what?" Firth held up the key. "Redwater's vulnerabilities, behavioral fractures, command weaknesses, team dynamics, internal fault lines, everything." Doyle paled. "You compiled it for the Fold?" Firth nodded once, solemn. "It was supposed to prove this base is salvageable, that we are worth reforming." Zara stepped until she stood only a pace away from him. "Declan," she said gently, "the Fold isn't looking to reform Redwater." He swallowed. "Yes, they are." Zara shook her head. "The Fold is looking for collapse points. They're not saving you. They're surveying you." Firth's breath caught. He looked down at the key. For the first time, uncertainty shook his hand. "No," he whispered. "They said this would help strengthen the network." "It will," Zara said softly. "Their network. Not yours. Silence. Doyle's voice trembled. Firth, give it to her. Please. For a moment it seemed he might, but then Firth's back straightened. Resolve reforged in a single heartbeat. No, he said. If you take this, everything I've done becomes meaningless. Zara's voice softened further. Almost a whisper. It only becomes meaningless if you refuse to choose differently now. Firth closed his eyes, exhaled slowly, and then, instead of handing her the key, he snapped his eyes open and abruptly turned toward the nearest exit. Ward yelled, "Firth, don't!" Zara lunged. Firth sprinted, the crowd split, chairs toppled. Doyle shouted orders no one heard. Zara grabbed the edge of Firth's vest, but he twisted hard, slamming his shoulder back into her, breaking free long enough to shove the data key into the wall port of the emergency comms terminal. A single light blinked on the device, a heartbeat of silence. Then the screen flashed. Uploading. Viridian relay. Active gasps broke out. Granger bolted forward to pull the terminal plug, but Zara threw her arm out sharply. "Don't touch it," she ordered. "Why?" Holt barked. Zara stared at the blinking screen, jaw tightening. "Because once a Viridian relay begins," she said quietly, "stopping it triggers an automatic purge." Ward's face drained. "Meaning?" Zara looked at the hall with a calm far more terrifying than panic. "Meaning the fold will erase everything within a 300-meter radius." The dining hall erupted into chaos, because the upload had begun, and Zara Kingsley had less than 2 minutes to stop a detonation that no one else in Redwater even understood. The emergency comms terminal flickered in violent bursts of blue and red as the words, "Uploading. Viridian relay." Active pulsed on the screen like a countdown only Zara Kingsley could truly read. Around her, panic erupted. Chairs scraped, boots scrambled. Voices overlapped in terrified shouts. Sergeant Holt Maddox barked orders that no one could hear over the pounding rush of fear. Lieutenant Karina Doyle clutched the edge of a table, knuckles white, trying to steady herself. Corporal Granger looked from the terminal to the exit and back again, torn between flight and duty. And Captain Andre Navarro, he remained still as if the chaos around him were merely wind passing through tall grass. He had known something like this could happen. He had hoped it wouldn't, but Zara didn't move toward the exit. She moved toward the terminal. "Kingsley, don't!" Granger shouted. "You said it'll blow if we interrupt the upload." Zara didn't look back. "That's right," Doyle's voice cracked. "Then why are you going toward it?" "Because the only way to stop a Viridian relay," Zara said evenly, "is to finish it." A wave of confusion rolled through the hall. Firth froze mid-step. He had expected resistance. Not this. "What are you talking about?" Holt yelled. "Why would we finish the upload?" Zara finally turned her head toward them. "Because Viridian relays have a fail-safe. If they detect interference, they self-destruct. But if they detect completion without transmission, they collapse into an inert archive loop." Ward blinked rapidly. "Meaning, it simulates a successful upload," Zara explained, "but sends nothing. It tricks the device into thinking the job is done." Doyle grasped the implication with dawning horror and hope. "And that prevents the purge?" "Yes." A breath shuddered through the hall, but Firth's face twisted in disbelief. "You're lying," he snapped. "The fold wouldn't design weaknesses." "They didn't," Zara replied simply. "Central oversight inserted them." That hit him like a strike to the ribs. Zara approached the terminal with cautious steps, hands steady, eyes razor-sharp. She reached for the controls but didn't touch them yet. She was watching the pattern of lights, the rhythm of the relay, calculating timing as if counting heartbeats. Firth took a step forward. "Stop. Zara, stop. If you let it complete." "It won't send anything," she repeated softer this time. "Only you can decide whether your actions end here or escalate into something you can't undo." Firth's breath hitched. His eyes burned with conflict. "I tried to make this place better," he whispered. "You still can," she said. Her voice held no judgment, only clarity. Ward stepped beside Zara, trembling slightly but solid. "We can fix this," he said to Firth, "but only if you let us." For the first time since the relay activated, Firth looked uncertain, a man suspended between ideology and conscience. Navarro finally stepped forward, speaking for the first time since the chaos began. "Firth, he said quietly. She's telling the truth. The shock that hit the room wasn't from his words, but from the weight behind them. Firth stared at him. Captain, you knew. You knew about the failsafe? Navarro exhaled, the kind of exhale that carried years of regret. I knew enough, he said. Enough to understand I made a mistake. Enough to know she's here to stop what I started. Something inside Firth wavered. Truly wavered. Zara watched him. You choose, she said softly. Right now. The blinking lights accelerated. The upload was nearing the final third. Firth's hand shook. He looked at the terminal, at Zara, at Navarro, at Ward. He closed his eyes. When he opened them again, there was no defiance left, only surrender. He stepped back. Zara nodded. A tiny gesture, but it carried the weight of a truce. She placed her fingers on the terminal interface. Her hands moved with precision, navigating concealed menus and override sequences that only someone with null meridian clearance would even know existed. The relay pulsed. The lights surged. Holt held his breath. Doyle pressed a hand over her mouth. Half the room silently prayed. Zara entered one final command, and then the screen flashed white. The hum stopped. Every light on the data key went dark. The words appeared. Relay archived. No transmission. Silence collapsed into the room like a tidal wave. Then slowly, as if afraid sound might break the fragile peace, Ward whispered, "She did it." Holt sank into a chair, shaking, adrenaline draining from his body. Doyle wiped her eyes. Granger let out a low, shaky laugh. Firth crumpled to the floor, face buried in his hands. Not in defeat, but in release. Navarro approached Zara and spoke with quiet sincerity. "Kingsley, I'll accept whatever comes next." She nodded once. "You will face consequences," she said, "but not the ones the Fold told you to expect." Ward stepped closer, voice soft. "So what now, ma'am?" Zara looked at the shaken faces around her, at people who had nearly been turned into collateral in someone else's ideology. "Now," she said gently, "Redwater begins again." Her voice washed over them like a reset. A new culture, a new standard, a new reckoning. She turned toward the exit, shoulders steady, ready to oversee the aftermath, ready to rebuild what nearly fell. And as the soldiers followed her with their eyes, a mixture of awe, gratitude, and disbelief, one truth settled into every mind in the hall. Redwater Garrison would never be the same again. And if you've been listening this far, subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments what time it is where you're watching from. It helps more than you know.